Now, when it comes to pruning or this cutting away of dead things, whether that's relationships, friendships, old mindsets, old ways of being or operating, this process is necessary as believers. We are going to go through many pruning seasons and pruning moments in our life. Hello everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Melody and I make faith-based content here on YouTube. I post new videos every single Monday. So if that is something you're interested in, definitely be sure and subscribe. I would love to have you join the family. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about the pruning process. And specifically, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 signs that God is pruning you or that you are going through a pruning season. Now, when it comes to pruning or this cutting away of dead things, whether that's relationships, friendships, old mindsets, old ways of being or operating, this process is necessary as believers. We are going to go through many pruning seasons and pruning moments in our life. And sometimes we can feel like because it's not fun and because it doesn't feel good, that God is punishing us through this process. But actually, it's the complete opposite. The Lord is pruning us because He loves us. He loves us so much that He doesn't want us to carry around these dead branches in our life. And so as we go through these 3 signs, I'm going to be pulling from a specific chapter of the book of Matthew. So in Matthew chapter 10, the Lord has gathered up His 12 disciples and basically equipped them by giving them authority to cast out demons and heal others, to go out into the land of Galilee and to preach His message, and again, to cast out demons and heal the sick. So as He is giving them these instructions, He's also preparing them for what they can expect on this journey. Now, when I think of people in the Bible who were pruned to perfection, not meaning that they are perfect, but basically we can see this amazing transformation that has happened as God has pruned them, I think of the disciples. I personally feel like no one in the Bible knows pruning better than these 12. And as they accepted Jesus' call, they had to let go of their past careers, pruning. They had to let go of being around their family and friends, pruning. They had to let go of how they operated, how they thought about things, because Jesus came to literally turn things upside down. Pruning. And so as all of this pruning is happening, and as again in chapter 10 of the book of Matthew, Jesus is preparing them to go out for the first time by themselves, He is giving them instructions and also letting them know what they can expect on this journey. This journey is not going to be easy, but this journey is going to be worth it. And so we too can apply this on what we can expect as we are going through the pruning process, as we are being shaped, molded, and fashioned into becoming more Christ-like and to see more of the fruits of the Spirit in our lives. Now, before we hop into our 3 signs, I definitely encourage you to pause here, open up your Bible, sis, read through Matthew chapter 10, and then as we go through the 3 signs and we read over some verses together, everything will make a little bit more sense because you'll have context of the entire chapter. So take a second and do that. Now, one more thing before we hop into our 3 signs, I want to go ahead and thank the sponsor of today's video, Faithful Counseling. You guys already know I absolutely love working with Faithful Counseling and I believe in their services so much. They basically are a Christian counseling service. You're able to sign up with them and get paired with a Christian mental health licensed professional. And I love the aspect of bridging the gap between Christians and therapy, Jesus and therapy. Like, it is so important to do both. There are some traumas and some experiences that we have to unpack with a licensed mental health professional, but bringing Jesus into it is a game changer. So that is personally why I love Faithful Counseling. My Christian therapist and I have been journeying together for quite a while now, and it's been so helpful for me to have a safe space to bring over to her everything that I feel like the Lord is teaching me. Whether it's the pruning, whether it's the isolation, or whether it's the good things, I'm able to unpack these things with someone who not only believes in Jesus and the Lord, but someone who has my best interest at heart and knows all things mental health. So if you guys are on the fence about therapy, I always say this, let this be your sign. I'm gonna have a link in the description box for you to sign up with Faithful Counseling today, and they even offer financial aid. All right, guys, now with all of that being said, let's go ahead and hop into our 3 signs. So number 1 on our list today, the first sign that God is pruning you is if you are starting to shift your priorities. You're noticing that you are valuing what God values above what your flesh values. You are choosing God's ways above of the worldly ways. Now, when it comes to this shift happening, sometimes it can be subtle and sometimes it can be like this night and day thing, but it's going to happen nonetheless. Now, these verses I want to go ahead and point us to in Matthew, again, Matthew chapter 10. Let's go ahead and read them together and then we'll dive further into what this sign can look like in our lives today. Again, this is Matthew chapter 10, verses 26 through 31. It says, "Therefore, don't be afraid of them, since there is nothing covered that won't be uncovered, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the light. What you hear in a whisper, proclaim on the housetops. Don't fear those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. Rather, fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Aren't 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them falls to the ground without your Father's consent. But even the hairs on your head have been counted. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows." So as you can see here in Jesus's instructions to the disciples, he's basically telling them that they need to shift their mindset, that on this journey and for us during this pruning process, the things and the voices and the concerns of others, the opinions of others, these aren't things that we need to pay attention to, and these aren't things that should concern us. We need to be worried about what God is calling us to do, not someone else's opinion over here. And how we can actually do this is by knowing that God has the final say. God is going to be the one that can cut not just the flesh, but the soul. Yes, man may be able to cut our flesh, but they cannot touch our soul. And that's something that he is pointing out here. And so on this journey during this pruning process, when we start to see that we actually are valuing what God values above what our flesh normally would value or what the world is valuing, that is a sign that 1, we are right where we need to be, and 2, that the pruning is happening and it is producing fruit. So that is going to be sign number 1. So sign number 2 on our list today, the second sign that God is pruning you or that you are going through a pruning season, is if you are facing persecution, rejection, or judgment. Now, these definitely are not fun things, and I feel like I want to just put that out there right now. These aren't things that we normally celebrate or we get excited about, but these are things that can indicate what is happening in our lives right now. Sometimes we go through things and we're like, Lord, what are you doing? So if you're experiencing this, you can know, okay, this is a part of the pruning process. This ultimately is going to produce good fruit. No, it's not fun to be judged. No, it's not fun to be persecuted. But if Jesus was persecuted, you can expect that you also are going to deal with some persecution as well. If Jesus was misunderstood and judged, you also can expect that you are going to be judged and misunderstood. And through that process, that is where we get to develop the fruits of the Spirit. That is where we get to develop more Christ-likeness. And so as these things are experienced, we can hold on to the fact that we are being pruned, dead things are being cut away, and that ultimately it is going to produce a good thing and a good work in our lives. So the verse I have for here, I'm going to go ahead and pop it up and read it with you. It is Matthew chapter 10, verses 16 through 22. And basically Jesus is outlining to the disciples right before they go on this journey all the things that they are going to encounter, all the persecution, all the judgment, all the misunderstandings, all the attacks, and he's preparing them. And so let us read this together and really understand that God is also saying this to us. These are things that we need to be prepared to experience on our Christian walks, but also in our pruning season. So let's read it together. So again, this is Matthew chapter 10, verses 16 through 22. And it says, "Look, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as serpents and as innocent as doves. Beware of them, because they will hand you over to local courts and flog you in their synagogues. You will even be brought before governors and kings because of me, to bear witness to them and the Gentiles. But when they hand you over, don't worry about how or what you are to speak, for you'll be given what to say at that hour, because it isn't you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father is speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and father his child. Children will rise up against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved." One of the things that stands out the most to me from these verses is that first part where Jesus says you need to be as shrewd as a snake and as harmless as a dove. And so I did some deep diving. I read a few Bible commentaries to really get an understanding of what exactly Jesus is saying here, because these are instructions on how to deal with the persecution, how to deal with the misunderstandings, how to deal with the judgment. And basically this means to use wisdom. You don't have to fight or defend yourself in the flesh against these attacks. You just have to use wisdom. lamb, harmless as a dove, shrewd as a snake. A snake is going to be attacked by everyone. So when you are shrewd as a snake, that means that you use wisdom and creativity to defend yourself. And harmless as a dove is a little bit easier to understand, but ultimately we want to make sure that we are letting God fight for us. We are not relying on our flesh. We're depending on the Father to defend us in the Spirit. And by doing that, we're relying on wisdom from the Lord. It says in the Bible that if we are lacking wisdom, we can go to God, ask for wisdom, and He will give it to us without reproach. So as we are navigating this persecution and judgment, we can not only know what's happening, aka we are going through a pruning process, but God has also given us instructions on the steps we can take to walk it out. So ultimately, He gets the glory. We don't have to worry about defending ourselves because God is going to do it. So that is going to be sign number 2. So sign number 3 today on our list, the third and final sign that God is pruning you, is if you are having to depend radically on God's provision. Now, when it comes to this particular sign, I want us to first start off by reading the verses I have for you here. So they come from, again, of course, Matthew chapter 10. And I feel like Jesus really beautifully shows the steps that the disciples are going to take that's going to differentiate them from the people that normally would be doing what they're doing. And that is something that we also are going to experience as we're going through the pruning process and just being believers in general. We're going to be countercultural. We're going to be doing things that not everyone is doing. And part of that is radically depending on God. It's easy to depend on yourself. It's easy to say, I'm going to take matters into my own hands, but it takes faith to say, I trust that God's got me. I don't know where it's going to come from, but I trust that God is going to pull through for me. And that is really what this sign is all about, radically depending on God's provision. So let's go ahead and read these verses. Again, this is Matthew chapter 10, verses 9 through 13. And it says, don't take any money in your money belts, no gold, silver, or even copper coins. Don't carry a traveler's bag with a change of clothes and sandals or even a walking stick. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality because those who work deserve to be fed. Whenever you enter a city or village, search for a worthy person and stay in his home until you leave. When you enter his home, give it your blessing. If it turns out to be a worthy home, let your blessing stand. If it is not, take back the blessing. So as you can see with these instructions, Jesus is telling the disciples, don't take any money, don't take a change of clothes, don't even take a walking stick, don't even take extra shoes. I want you to be fully dependent on God. And that goes for us too. When we are being cut away, when these dead branches are being removed from our lives, it causes us to increase our reliance on God, His timing, His ways, everything that has to do with staying in His will. And the beautiful thing to me about these verses and just this pruning process that God is going to bring us all through at one point or another is the fact that as our reliance on Him increases, so does our ability to see more of Him in our life. And who doesn't want that? And so that is going to be sign number 3. All right, sis, that is going to be it for me. These are 3 signs that God is pruning you. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And now, of course, it is your turn. So in the comments below, I would love to know, what is one thing, one dead branch that God has removed during your pruning process? This can be a job, a relationship, a mindset, a thought process, a habit. The Lord is going to take what needs to be taken. So all of our answers are likely going to be varying. But I think, again, that's the beautiful part about having individual relationships with the Lord. So I'm going to be dropping mine because I've gone through quite a few pruning processes and lost quite a few things along the way. So I'm going to be sharing mine in the comments. So definitely take a second, share yours, and scroll on through. Again, thank you so much for watching today's video. Thank you so much to Faithful Counseling for sponsoring today's video. And I will see you guys in my next one. Peace.